those who don't know me, I'm Anne or Annie Beavis. I'm known by both, depending where you know me, and the reputation shifts accordingly. Some of you at the Workplace Trends will have seen me speak before. That's because I know that Maggie takes the sort of sustainability and circular economy agenda really seriously, and we've really enjoyed collaborating with her to try and put this event together. I'm the warm-up act. I'm going to be followed by two teams of people that I've had the pleasure to work with in different guises. They'll be bringing the really interesting stuff to this event. And after you've heard from three of us and there'll be questions and answers, we're going to go walk around and see and experience firsthand what we do and how we do it. And then by magic, when you come back, there'll be some extra refreshments here of a cooler kind. For those who don't know Crown Workspace, our core business is moving and changing businesses. Been doing it for a really long time. We do interiors, fit out, storage, IT, lots of wonderful things. The stuff that I really care about is the sustainable stuff. The guys here who manage moves are going to go talk about the moves. We're not talking about the moves. The thing that when I came to work with Crown, I'd previously worked with Mr. Jones here from ITV at a waste management company. And when you work in waste and you see just how wasteful it is, you realise that it's a mission to get people to do things slightly differently. And one of the great things about what Premier at the time, who I worked for and taken over by Crown Workspace, did, is that they move stuff really well. And when assets are in a workplace, and the workplace is a really, really wasteful place, if you're already there moving them and treating them like an asset, you're the ideal people to facilitate reuse. Once something's outside and there's rain on it, you know, that's a waste. So I started to work with these guys since 2009. We've been doing lots of great stuff, driving sustainability into the workplace change process. That's mainly involved me going along and nagging clients and trying to persuade them to do things differently. Understanding what motivates them, looking at the blockers and the decision makers, and trying to work with the team here to sort of put different service interventions into place to make things to be slightly different. Unfortunately, what I've discovered is not everyone's as passionate about the circular economy and the environment as I am. Everybody's got different motivations for doing things. But whatever they are, I think right now, if you're managing a workplace design or a workplace change process, you're going to be asked about sustainability in one form or another. And we got challenged with one of our new clients, and through a lot of change that we'd had internally, we were looking at working with a client who wanted to work with us to make sure that they weren't buying new unless they had to. And they wanted to try and reuse their assets longer. They wanted to recycle and reuse them. They wanted to donate them. These are all the things that we do really well. But they needed our help to try and persuade and communicate that message more effectively. And so, building on our experience and our knowledge, we've brought all of that together, along with the desire to help our clients bring circular economy into everyday operations with Crown Circulate. Crown Circulate captures a series of principles about how we look at things a bit different, and it's directly building out from the circular economy. The big thing, when we reflected everything we'd done right and wrong in the last 10 years, the missing skill that we had, that I don't think we talked about anywhere, was actually how to make things happen. And that was about having a process, a project management process, an evaluation process, and a way of looking at assets as something that should never be wasted. So we have all of these different principles, and we use these principles to guide our service innovation, our thinking, and what we do. And reevaluate is right at the start. And it's this lens of reevaluating waste, resource the whole time that has led us building out our circular clearance services, our furniture services, and increasingly our interiors and other services, in particular in IT. And hopefully we'll showcase them to you today. It starts with the reevaluation process. Our lovely Jackie here runs a great workplace consultancy piece, and what we're doing is embedding into the workplace consultancy sustainability thinking, because if you can start thinking of assets right at the start of a workplace change project, you're more likely to be reusing them for much longer. And if you've got the technology and the solutions that sit there, you can really make wonderful things happen, as I know that the two speakers later will talk about. Another core principle in terms of the circular economy and workplace for us is renewing. A lot of the time people get rid of stuff because it isn't as new. And in reality, it's only just off new. It might even be new. If we can bring things back to be as new, if we can renew them, refurbish, remanufacture, and the economics not only stack up, the environment stacks up as well. We're going to showcase this. You're going to be walking around, seeing people take waste, bring it back to life, look better, actually sometimes look even better. Because when we have stuff come back to our site, we see faults that the manufacturer never knew would happen. We've collaborated with a lot of manufacturers. We're the refurbished take-back partner for Herman Miller. We've worked with other major manufacturers to show them faults that their testing process doesn't actually show up, because humans are stupid and they do things like ram chairs under desks and do things that no machines know not to do that. So I'm not worried about AI, because humans will never be smart enough to overcome some of the obvious challenges. So you'll see this as we're walking around. A big part of, sometimes people say about the circular economy and they think it's just about money. Actually, in a way it is. If we can make the finances and economics stack up, sometimes it doesn't matter about the environment or the social impacts of reuse. But you have to make it easy. And that was one of the big barriers that we recognised we needed to overcome. By making it easy to resell and buy back furniture, we could make it much more acceptable in a corporate environment. People will jump on now more readily at home on Facebook Marketplace or eBay or buy stuff from Vinted, but you want that to happen in a corporate environment. It's really difficult. Is there any procurement people here? No, good. They make it tough. They do make it tough. I mean, and then they'll say they want to buy reused, but they write a whole documentation of a contract that makes it absolutely impossible. I mean, Stu's laughing now, no comment. So we try to make it easy. The website makes it all look fancy. We try to present stuff. So there's always going to be barriers to the circular economy and to engaging in this way. But we believe that through the principle of being able to buy things back and sell them easily, we kind of take away that barrier, as it were. Redistribute is, for us, we know that a lot of assets sit there that have another economic or a social value. This just in the wrong place. And again, going back to what I said about re-evaluation, knowing where it should be and who wants it and getting it there, that's just another barrier to take away. Redistribution for us is about understanding where the future assets should be. Now, for many clients, it's across their existing estates. They just need to be able to reuse it readily. And we'll hear great examples today from people that know that's the case and recognise even then it can be quite difficult to do. But we help clients understand through projects and workplace change where their assets can be in the future. But more importantly, we work out who else needs them when there's a real social value as well. And I'm not going to talk about that, because when you walk around, the ladies that make the magic happen, you can see some fantastic numbers here. They'll be talking about that, because I think that's a really key part of what we do. I'm not going to talk about recycling. I spent years doing that, didn't I, Mr. Jones? Yeah. Because that's where people start often with recycling. I just think, if we have to, that's great. And of course, it's an obvious thing. And when we don't just recycle here, we try and do it to the highest possible standards. Ellie at the back looks after our relationship with our waste contractors. She pushes our ops guys to not go for the rankings. We've got a map here. Actually, we've now taken any of those reds off. We're not allowed to go to the red sites. Clients want zero to landfill. It's only possible where it's possible. I don't care what anybody says. If you're in the Highlands of Scotland and you want a zero to landfill, I'll talk all day long about BS, but it's not something that we do. We're honest about what can and can't be done and where it is operationally efficient and isn't. But we're always looking at what next. So the textile scrap that we have a scheme set up so it goes to a social enterprise that works with fashion students. We try and close loop off everything we can. We're not perfect, no one is, so we won't say we are. And finally, I think through our principle of reporting and being transparent and honest, we can give people the data that informs better decision making. There is economic savings for engaging in the circular economy. They're obvious. There's environmental savings, embodied carbon, and we're going to learn more about that later. And there's social value savings, where actually right now, in this country, never more than ever before have we needed to be able to do social redistribution because, anyway, there was a budget yesterday, we won't go on. But having those stats can help drive the business case for them. So we try and make sure that everyone's got the project data that they need at the end of their project to persuade the people that make the decisions that this is the right way to go, that embracing the circular economy is part of workplace management, not just as a project, but every day. We've got enough stuff. We've kind of, who was it a few years ago said we've reached peak stuff? We've got enough stuff. We've got enough really good furniture, IT. We always need more. I'm not against new, good, quality design stuff. I'm just against bad stuff that's been imported that breaks the day after the warranty. Let's just get rid of that and design really good stuff, use stuff for longer, use it well, and share it when it's not. I'm not good. These are just our core principles, but I've talked enough about our principles, and I'm hoping today, as visitors of Workspace, you'll get to appreciate what they are and share in them. I'm just really chuffed to have people here who want to listen and learn and understand about what the whole event is. I'm open to questions if anyone's got any quick questions, but I will be coming in at the end and then taking you around and answering them. But this is who we are. Thank you very much for coming. And unless there's a question now, I'm going to hand over to the wonderful gentleman from JLL.
Cool. So, hi, I'm Stuart Cochrane, if I've been bad, or Stu Cochrane if I've not. This is
Nikhil, Dhumma, also from JLL. Stuart, do you want to perhaps say your role and then I'll do mine?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I set our sustainability ambition within our workplaces in JLL. So I look after our corporate real estate. That's 14 offices in the UK and sort of 10 smaller residential offices. Driving our sustainability agenda, how we reduce our negative impact and maximise our positive impact. And circularity is one of the key enablers to that agenda.
And I'm an architect by profession. I've sat in multiple roles on our workplace projects, initially as lead designer on a few projects, and then more recently moved over to the client side to act as client design advisor and try and act as a bit of a translator between our design teams, taking some of the aspirations and intentions from a client perspective and translating those to and from to try and streamline the process. And one of the things I think we're going to be talking about is iterative learning and taking lessons learned from one project and ensuring that they're carried through to the next.
In other words, you communicate my requirements in a language designers can understand, right? Let's make this interactive. I'll talk. When it gets boring, stick your hand up and ask me a question that makes it less boring. We operate in a sector that's got real impact. The built environment, roughly 40% of global emissions, hugely linear in its consumption of raw materials, as Annie was alluding to. Research back in '95 suggested 3 billion tonnes of raw materials. I mean, it's just staggering numbers. It's probably closer to 4 billion tonnes now. We're still building at scale. So we're part of a world that does a lot of harm, and we need to work out how we break that. The circular economy, as I said, it's a real enabler for us. The principles of the circular economy called out in terms of eliminating waste, locking in that energy that's been put into products in the first place. But then the bit that's often missed is, how are we going to unpick the kind of damage to the environment that the linear economy has done? How are we going to give nature the space to regenerate and therefore sequester carbon that we've been pumping out into the system? We've worked with Crown for a number of years in various different guises, including business in the community, part of the Circular Economy Task Force. They're a supplier to JLL. They've been on a journey with us, which I would like to talk about now. For me, it's really important that we position this as we're telling our story. We're not making claims. We're not setting ourselves up to be the answer to all the problems. We just want to share our story, our learnings, and be challenged by you guys. Back in
that's successes and where we've come against some challenges that frankly we can't solve on our own, and it needs to be an industry-wide effort.
Yep, absolutely. Within the UK, we set a net zero aspiration back in July 2019. We absolutely embed net zero into our corporate real estate strategy through leasing arrangements, where we've got to come out of a space and move somewhere else. How we address our operational carbon requirements as part of that process, as well as a bunch of other things that I'm going to kind of allude to a bit later on in the presentation. But how we can address what is a kind of a material kind of carbon bombshell that's not really been spoken about properly in the industry at the moment, and seek to address the carbon intensity of our fit outs, looking to halve that by 2030. These are really big ambitions, and we're definitely on that road. Here's the kind of journey that I said we've been on. Back in Manchester was the kind of first step on that journey, and the first time that we applied business in the community circular economy fit out guidance. We'd been part of the development of that alongside Crown and others, and it was really informative. And I think the big lesson learned from that one, which I haven't captured later on, is have a go. Until you actually have a go and start this, you won't know what the problems are that you need to solve. That spat out just a phenomenal amount of learnings that informed what we did at our 20 Water Street project in Canary Wharf. It's a project we're incredibly proud of. It won the Circular Economy Innovation Award at ED last year. And we, as a business, we haven't had a great track record in terms of walking the walk, in terms of our own corporate real estate. So it was a bit of a switch moment for our business.
I think so, and it was coupled with the fact it was also nominated for a BCO award, and we're trying to balance sort of what a corporate occupier client might want in terms of look and feel, but also trying to match that with sort of the quantitative element of reducing our footprint.
I'm not going to get into the weeds of all the targets, but to speak to the operational carbon element, we're absolutely applying the kind of carbon hierarchy within the Advancing Net Zero framework. So measured data, reduce your energy load, high quality renewables, offset where you can. We're committed to getting to net zero without offsetting as part of our agenda in terms of operational carbon. We also have some certification targets that brings other challenges, and how you kind of marry up those sometimes aligning, sometimes conflicting requirements with circularity, with inclusive design, but more on that later. So, what we're seeking to do, address net zero in operation, but also address embodied carbon. Quite quickly, we kind of lent into the fact that we needed to develop some new knowledge, some new tools to help us do that. And we're very lucky at JLL, and constantly standing on the shoulders of giants, that we've got some fantastic internal capability in terms of our sustainability consulting colleagues, but also our net zero carbon design team. One of the first things we developed was a tool to kind of create a data-driven market appraisal of which assets we wanted to be in terms of alignment with our net zero agenda, but also with our well-being agenda. We also had to develop tools, because there's no industry standard approach on how you address embodied carbon in tenant fit out. We've applied the RICS whole life carbon assessment and then tailored it to tenant fit out. And then off the back of the Manchester project, we've developed our own proprietary JLL low embodied carbon and circular fit out guidance, which we give to our design teams to help inform them how they can reduce embodied carbon in our fit outs.
I think it's worth saying, sort of with the top one, very early on we realised that the choice of space is half the battle. That was really critical to achieving our outcomes and objectives. The net zero carbon standard seems really developed in terms of architectural thought, but less so on fit out. It just seems to lag behind a little bit, so we really needed to push on that one. And then in terms of the guidance, think Stuart and I probably bashed heads for about a year, sort of going through the detail. Well, what does this mean? What's your hierarchy? How are you making decisions? You know, what do we need to respond to as a design team? If you can empower us, if you can help us understand what you want to achieve, we can come to you with suggestions rather than questions, and that improves the whole process. I think one of the key things throughout all of this is the importance of collaboration across an entire project team, not just within a design team, but everybody sort of needing to front load their efforts, because it has exponential benefits as you progress through a project.
Yeah, it can't be client and supply chain. You have to work together collaboratively, or it breaks down very, very quickly. Next set of things that we've done as part of this story is, rather than just measuring our performance at the end of a project, we're starting to put time into the program now where we can do effectively design stage assessments against both our operational energy modelling. So this is the latest one at Leeds, where we're designing to the 2030 UK GBC energy use intensity targets for tenants. So very much kind of best practice in the market at the moment. I think to benchmark that, somewhere between 90 and 110 is typical energy use intensity in the corporate space at the moment. It's really, really difficult. You have to make energy-led design choices quite early on in the process in terms of how you organise your space to optimise for that.
Stuart, just on that one, again, front loading, it's really important to explain the impact of some of these decisions to key stakeholders early on to get their buy-in, because you get asked those questions midway through the design and the whole thing slows down. Another point in terms of why we're doing stage-by-stage assessments, one could argue that we're sort of increasing cost in terms of consultant time and just time spent doing this, but what does it allow us to do? One, check our own progress. From a client perspective, we understand how we're tracking, but also it allows us to review and understand where there are failings and challenges along the way that we might want to seek to address the next time we do a project.
Yeah, good count. And same principle for embodied carbon. So this is probably a little bit more organic than the operational carbon design process, in that we can actually test our designs for carbon during stage 2 and stage 3. It may be things that inform how we lay out the space. Like if you move that room to there, you can actually reduce embodied carbon by locating it next to the core because you're building one less wall. So some really pragmatic stuff, but also coordination with the engineering services, the things that deliver light, air into the space. How you optimise those two worlds. Often they align, sometimes they don't. Leeds is the latest project. I guess the other thing that's really interesting here is that probably different to a building, every tenant fit out's got its own scope. You know, sometimes you'll go into space and be like this, it's got a suspended ceiling. Sometimes we'll go into a building, there's not a raised access floor. So the scope of your project and the carbon that's associated with that has to be tailored, and therefore we've set some business rules that allow us to kind of baseline for a particular project, and then we measure our progress against that baseline. Happy to talk more to that later. It's a little bit kind of nuanced. So what we tell our colleagues, I think the change management piece that Nikhil alluded to is really, really important. Had a conversation today with a stakeholder in Leeds, really worried about kind of what Second Life task shares was going to mean. It's really important that circular or second life doesn't mean second best, and how we position that during the design process and the stakeholder engagement process with our colleagues. And
we've really had to push our design team. And I've learnt this sort of by doing it and then sort of realising what we need to do, is to change the language that they are using to explain design decisions. And it's not just on the basis of aesthetics or even durability, but we had to develop internally a decision-making appraisal matrix almost, one to empower the design teams, but also it helps us to explain what the logic and thinking is behind certain decisions, which can then be played out to wider stakeholder groups, decision makers, but also the people that inhabit our spaces. Why is this like how it is, and so forth?
Some of this is subjective, and we'll take feedback on whether you like it or not, but We are quite big fans of this exposed services design, the industrial look. You see it quite a lot in the corporate world now. But there's materiality in this decision making as well. You don't put a suspended ceiling in, you're literally saving tons and tons of carbon. That links to some other strategies that we have to deploy in the fit out. That acoustic performance of those spaces is really important, not just for our colleagues, but also for clients coming into the space. So how we deal with acoustics via the raft, where there isn't a suspended ceiling, that presents a new design challenge. Furniture solutions for small meeting spaces. These pod furniture rooms, you can disassemble them in 4 hours. Anne, I think, is that right?
I don't actually do it, believe it or not.
Do you not? You do everything else, right? But embedding that kind of end of first life thinking into your design process, that you treat these things as assets rather than things that you've got to dismantle and put into a skip at the end of your lease. We're also consolidating space like the whole industry is at the moment. Spaces can't just do one job. That flexibility, reconfiguration it comprises part of the design narrative as well.
Yeah, and like everything, there's no hard and fast rule. There are certain instances where you can't do that, and there's nuances and decisions that have to be made along the way in terms of what are you willing to negotiate on, what do you have to hold dear, and how do you communicate that?
Circular furniture package, we'll skip through that, but generally 80% of our furniture in our fit outs is second life, either reused from our estate or remanufactured or procured from Anne and colleagues. Where we have to buy new, we're obviously looking at longevity, high recycled content, and refurbishment cycles alongside those products. Say more about what's coming next. The materials piece is really interesting. People are less engaged, and unfortunately, in kind of remanufactured furniture, but they love materials with a story. So that waste into wonder, post-industrial plastic waste turned into a worktop, people really engage with. To that point, Nikhil, you may be better talking to some of these things than I, but I mean, ultimately, we're trying to reduce our footprint in our product selection.
Reduce the footprint, sort of taking into account storytelling, because as Stuart mentioned, that's a really big part, and that's something quite tangible for a lot of people. It was mentioned on the previous slide about natural content, so bio-based materials, knowing that sequestered carbon and what that potentially means at the end of a project. How long do we have left, or is that time? Okay. So we're looking at things such as timber. Can we move away from using steel frame internal partition systems and gypsum plasterboard to bio-based alternatives? Acoustics, what are we doing on that front? Stuart mentioned exposed soffits, but also within rooms, recycled PET has been there for a long time, but what are we doing, or what are we looking at in terms of things like mycelium, which again, something people can touch and feel, and they relate to that. What can we look at that's sequestering carbon in terms of its operation? So algae is something that we were looking at on a recent project. How could that contribute to capturing carbon dioxide, but also producing oxygen, and have that as a material that tells a story within the space, using it rather than just something that sits on a shelf. Lots of interesting stuff in that space.
Obviously, the space is going to look a bit different, but people are coming to the office for a different reason now. You're not coming in to sit at your desk post-pandemic, you're coming in to collaborate either with your colleagues or your clients. So the spaces have to speak to that use case as well. The principle of spaces having to work hard. In the design process, we're asking for what's the primary, secondary, tertiary use of this space? How's it going to reconfigure? What other spaces do we need in our office to make that work? So if we're decanting furniture, for example, from one setting for a big client event, where's it going to go? Been an interesting challenge.
It has, and it sort of reminded me of something that you said earlier on in terms of the real estate being quite linear in its sort of nature. I suppose we're also having to change our way of thinking, which has been predominantly linear, and having to think in multiple strands rather than a single strand. Which has been a challenge, and some people are further along that journey than others, but we are seeing a gradual shift from a design perspective, at least, not just interior architectural design, but the full scope of design teams are now sort of very much on board with that. Certainly the ones we're talking to. Carbon
tunnel focus, right? Real risk for everyone. our offices have to be spaces where people thrive, not survive. So we can't make them so puritanical that no one wants to come in. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but we've got multiple requirements on our projects. Some of them are linked to certification. There are parts of our agenda where things work really, really well together. So inclusive workplace design with nature, biodiversity, social value. They're quite happy bedfellows. Delivering kind of energy efficient, low carbon in operation workspaces often butts heads with some of the requirements in certification, but also in terms of inclusion. So how we manage that is quite challenging. And we haven't nailed it perfectly yet, but we just have more data that helps us make decisions. We're designing workspaces for everyone, not just the JLL population today, but for wider UK society. But like any cellular space, especially one that's kind of relatively underutilised, the business asks questions around that. Why are we putting all these spaces in there if hardly anyone's in there? Well, it's like someone might need to use it one day because we might employ someone who wants that space. But to keep it simple, you build walls, you put on a door, you need to deliver air and you need to deliver lighting. You're putting embodied carbon and energy into cellular spaces. We try to keep it as open as possible, but there are some rooms that you just need.
And it sets a marker in terms of where we want to be as a business tomorrow rather than just what we're doing today.
It's not all butting heads. Some of it's sort of synergist, as Nikhil was saying earlier. Health-led design, bio-based materials typically don't have harmful chemicals in them. So how we deliver really high quality air to our colleagues, how we make the most use of natural light to reduce the energy load we put on lighting, how we deliver acoustic comfort, but also neurodiverse design as well, with kind of dedicated quiet spaces away from the madding crowd. There are areas of it where it comes together quite nicely.
And we want our materials to do more than one thing as well, in the same way that we want our spaces to do more than one thing. So where it can be a natural material and have a secondary benefit, absorbing certain VOCs, for example, great. But we can work with that.
I guess lessons learned. Nikhil's alluded to some of this already, so I won't necessarily repeat it. But have big ambition. Please do have big ambition, but just be cognizant of the risks and challenges that come with that ambition. From a design point of view, definitely shifting from what do we want to achieve and finding products to fit it, to designing with stuff that's already in existence. You can't do everything. Balance risk of that delivery with the materiality of the impact of that design choice is one of the key lessons learned. And start with what you have. Like, default approach now before we start any project is an asset audit of what's in place. That goes beyond furniture. It includes things like worktops, lighting,
door sets.
Yeah.
And thinking about what we can use beyond just its initial use case. So a door leaf, could we turn that into a table, for example?
This is really interesting. It's required a shift from our project management teams as well. You need more time in the programme for certain things, or more emphasis in the programme for certain things earlier. The procurement also needs to kind of recognise that it's not like placing an order and in 6 weeks you get it. Sometimes it's saying we need a cut-off date, finding this product from the secondary market, and then we'll place a new order. So the programme just has to reflect that. The earlier the contract is engaged, the better. You'll just find more opportunities. It's about communicating market signals and then asking that market supply chain to respond to those.
To work with you on that.
Yeah. It's important to tell our story as well. I mean, it's kind of why we're here today. There's kind of business IP in this, but we believe that we have a purpose in addressing carbon as part of the built environment. We work with a number of industry partners. This group here is growing. The circular materials, circular construction sector is growing in a really exciting way. And we shouldn't hide from the fact that there are OPEX and CAPEX benefits that can be had from this approach. Sometimes it's cost neutral. It can be cost a little bit more sometimes. But it's about having the data to make those informed decisions. And then what next? I won't read through all of these, but clearly sort of focus on reuse. The kind of more passive materials is a bit Wild West at the moment. So things like raised access flooring, ductwork, it's a bun fight for stuff out there. rather than an established market. But I think we have to recognise that market's going to come at some point. Shifting the dial towards urban mining. So engaging with our project teams, our wider supply chain, to get visibility of projects that might feed ours as they're getting stripped out, so they're going to waste. We can design around that stuff moving forward. And then the now problem that Nikhil and I are leaning into is like trying to find a material passporting solution that's fit for purpose for a tenant space, and then defining and aligning our building information model data requirements to make that world come together.
And that's a big challenge, relating to sort of the PM approach and where that's locked in a design process, how you're engaging your design team partners, how you're engaging a contractor, explaining all this up front, and having time to take feedback, tweak, align, modify, because it will be bespoke to every single project for the moment. Even though you're trying to get to sort of a common language, it still needs work to get there.
And from a personal point of view, the thing that excites me most, well, the urban mining does excite me, but the bio-based materials sector, I'm just so excited about the opportunities that brings. And that's us.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
It was really interesting to hear the whole lot, because obviously we have parts of that journey we know and others that we don't. But I was really intrigued to know how much do staff respond to how well do staff respond to the new types of environments they're now working in, and what's their level of interest in the sustainability story that sits around it?
Well, you should read out that message from yesterday.
Yeah, we did a sustainability roadshow in Norwich yesterday, which was lovely. How do I answer that? The London audience is harder to please generally in life, right?
In everything.
I think our regional offices have probably been most transformative in terms of what they were to what they are now. And probably the level of staff engagement in that storytelling, because it's part of their market, their geography. What we want to do is embed this stuff into our service lines. Being able to walk the walk rather than talk the talk is really, really helpful as part of that sales process. So I think different people get engaged in different things, and you know, some of it has been like the giving back or the business school stuff. We've got a bunch of assets we don't want anymore because it doesn't fit the new office. How can we give those the greatest asset value but also do good with them? That resonates with people. Yeah. The material stories resonate with people, but I think it's a tangible example of us trying to live to our purpose, which generally cuts across most of our staff.
Rethinking our process, right? We talk about completion of a project and then say a soft landings period where people sort of get used to it. As part of that, we've also had to look at how can we implement storytelling sessions for local teams as every project goes live, and that goes beyond just the FM teams or the leadership of an office. We did it in Birmingham a couple of weeks ago. You know, you go and do a couple of days there in person. You explain what this material is. You know, this tabletop is made from recycled suits, for example, and people, oh, okay, I get it. You know, otherwise it's just a bit of a patterned surface. Explaining that.
I am being flippant, right? We did over 160 client tours of Water Street.
Wow.
In what, just over 12 months?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is a showpiece. And I think when our head of sustainability, Guy Granger, go on his world travels, the first thing he gets asked is, well, what are JLL doing? So I think the workplace is familiar to everyone, right? Most people have got a workplace, an office. So being able to showcase what you're all about through that space just becomes really tangible and accessible.
But it's not just... Well, it is people like Guy being asked that. I was asked the same question from the Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership. What is JLL doing in terms of inclusive design? And having spaces such as this to talk about that, but also say, look, we've tried to do this much. This is where we come against challenges. We need to put more thought into that. And we've seen it from Manchester to Water Street to Norwich to Glasgow to Birmingham and Leeds. So, our multi-faith spaces, for example, we've tweaked and tried to improve space by space by space. That seems to be in sync with how thoughts on, for example, inclusive design is moving forward. But it's great to be out in front on that and be able to participate in those conversations and be able to try it in practice rather than just in theory as well.
I guess you have a fortunate position in a sense in that you're working on a large property portfolio, so you can mine within your own portfolio. From your personal perspective, what do you think needs to change? Because a lot of end users say the biggest problem is timing. How do we find second life, be it furniture, be it materials in general? But equally, they don't future plan. What do you think what would be a game changer in your... I mean, that's a huge question and probably a little unfair. But.
Yeah, and I mean, look, a marketplace, like a national marketplace with regional distribution centres, everything connected via...
We're working on it.
Yeah. But, genuinely, I think it's about embedding these things as aspirations into projects, first of all. Yeah, if you go to a design team, say, we want to reduce embodied carbon, we want to maximise circularity on a fit-out, you communicate your intent, that gives you a chance. There are supply chains out there. It's not like there's nothing to go after. And at the moment, the corporate world is still consolidating their footprint. Yeah. So that's not going to last forever. So at the moment, it feels like it's probably easier at the moment than it has been. There's more suppliers coming through. You need to procure the right design partners as well, and construction partners. I think that's pretty crucial.
Yeah.
Feedback from ISG maybe in terms of there'll be more opportunities than you know.
Yeah, that was a good piece of intel. I think the key thing for me is that this can't be solved within the time frame, within the programme of a project. A lot of this thought has to be done outside of a project or in advance of a project. The challenge with that is who you're going to pay to do that thinking, because most people don't necessarily want to engage in that unless they're being paid to do that. We're lucky in that we are trying to do some of this thinking outside of our project because we've got repeat projects, but in truth, even though we've got a portfolio, we're still leaning into some of the same challenges. Sequencing, Water Street was unusual for us because it was delivered designed and delivered in the middle of the pandemic. We were able to decant out of one space. Everyone was working from home anyway. We were able to use that space as part of the logistics process. But otherwise, other projects, it's the same thing with Water Street. A lot of the assets that went into it, we had to think about future reuse potential rather than what can we reuse from the get-go, because also we didn't have the opportunity to get out there. In truth, as a design team, we also didn't know who to talk to at that point. Where can we find some of this stuff? So we had to think about it in that sense. That's changing.
The world's moved on a lot in 3 years.
Yeah.
It really has shifted in this space. I mean, the other thing is the opportunities can come late. So today I've just had a call with the PM on our Leeds fit out. We've got a Corinth work surface in our existing office in a print space, saying, well, can we take that out of use now and use that as work surfaces in some of our care rooms that are going into the new Leeds fit out? Sequencing is a key challenge. The more time you have, can you shut your existing office for 4 weeks? Presents more opportunities. I guess COVID's been useful for that. It showed that businesses can operate without an office for a short period of time. It's not a panacea. We're on a journey, is how I'd respond, I think.
And even with that one example, that one example of the reused worktop, the conversation that we were having yesterday and this morning about that, Stuart showed the conflict matrix earlier. Great, we can reuse this worktop. Is there a challenge from an inclusive design / neurodiversity perspective? Yeah, there might be. What do we want to do? Weigh up that balance and then make a decision with that full set of information that we were talking about in terms of an appraisal matrix. That's really helpful. It means that a decision can be made within half an hour of receiving the email, basically, rather than deliberating over a number of days.
I think we are at a cusp. I sense it changing, but you mentioned about timber, and I agree with you entirely, but on the other hand, in some ways, if you throw that timber away, it feels even more, metal has a value. So it will get recycled, whereas timber won't.
We're not talking about recycling, though.
I agree with you, but that's the logic that I'm hearing.
But but if we use timber, it's reduced upfront embodied carbon, and it's demountable. We can take it to the next one.
So it has to be designed in that way. It still has to be designed for disassembly and reuse, rather than being single-use timber.
Yeah. It's never one factor, and this is. I guess if I give one message here, it's so layered and so complex that you need time to make the right decisions. You need a framework for decision making, some broad principles around which people align, and then that allows you to travel quicker once you've got a design that's been developed.
Is that your one takeaway?
No,
Because mine would then be,
yeah.
It is really complex, but you've got to start somewhere and work it through as you move through.
I applaud you guys immensely. I think it's amazing the work you're doing. It's only through exemplar projects such as yours can people see the art of the possible.
But with humility, we've not nailed this at all.
Yeah.
Who has?
Thank you both. I'm a neurophysio, so I come from it. I love seeing you talk about the inclusive design, and I just wonder, have you seen a shift through your lens of accessible, inclusive design? We know we've got a globally ageing workforce, and we know that the range of hidden and other disabilities, but we know it's so much more than a ramp and a disabled toilet. So have you, in all your projects, seen a shift in the lens of what is inclusive design or accessible design?
So yes, PAT 6463, BS 15046, designing for menopause and menstruation. I mean, just in the last 18 months, we've again been on this journey for a while. So back in 2019, we started developing a UK inclusive workplace standard. That research informed an EMEA JLL diversity, inclusion and belonging standard, which we kind of apply as a baseline to our projects. But within the UK market, there's lots of research from Bureau Happold,
Arab, Motion Spot, lots of people like that. So if we want to be market leading, we have to consider what's best practiced in that market. And yes, absolutely, it has increased in our own considerations, our own thinking, our own ambitions in terms of inclusive design. And by that, I'm incorporating, designing for aging populations, neurodiversity, and so all of that stuff. It really has. But also, as I mentioned earlier, for us, it's not only about designing for our people today, but setting a marker out there in terms of our recruitment strategy for the next 5-10 years. Where do we want to be? Who might we want to attract in 5 years' time, and that might justify a single use case space today.
We've got 8 business research groups as well that cover gender equity, neurodiversity. You lead this work stream.
Gender balance, health and well-being, and disability, neurodiversity. There's a global network who are looking for race for change.
There's others.
Pride, building pride.
I'd like to say well done.
But they're consulted as part of the design process.
Yeah.
So we're not designing in a bubble. We're talking to our people, local office, but also key groups who might be not marginalised from the design process sometimes.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Can I introduce Donna Uden to you from ITV, or was from ITV until very recently, but Donna was my fixer for everything, project manager and workplace manager and all sorts of things for this project I'm going to talk about today. I just want to put this in. My name is Ian Jones. I'm Director of Workplace Services and Estates for ITV, which is a really posh title for being the person who looks after the toilets. Okay, I am a facilities manager by trade and will always be a facilities manager by trade, although they've given me property for the last 10 years to look after as well. We've got 60 buildings in this country, and it's an international company. A lot of people don't realise this ITV. We probably do more business in America than we do in the UK, but everybody knows ITV is Channel 3, or most of you will know ITV is Channel 3. I was going to start this presentation one way, but I'm actually going to start it just a slightly different way, just to give you a little bit of context. Why do I care about sustainability? So I've known Anne now for nearly 20 years. We met when we were working for a little waste company, and I can always remember standing in the yard with Anne in her hobnail boots and her hard hat on, and we were watching stuff come off the back of trucks, and we could not believe what we're actually throwing away that could genuinely be used again. And I said to her then, even this was in 2006, and I said to her then, if I'm ever in a position to be able to do something better than where I'm seeing people come from with this, I said then I'm going to make sure that we do it. And so my interest really started relatively recently in terms of sustainability. And what we've done at ITV since then is everything we've ever done, we've started to look at from a sustainable point of view. So I've been there 14 years, Donna been there about 55 years or something like that.
I joined when I was 16 and it was 44 years.
44 years,
I'm not as old as he makes me out to be. We're exactly the same age, eh? I'm 2 months older than Ian.
I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying anything. But we looked at everything that we did in some old buildings and new buildings and things that we did through that lens of sustainability. What can we do using what we've got, and could we do something different? Okay. So that's kind of the context of this. I'm going to talk about specifically about a project that we've just finished. It's taken us 3 years to do it. I thought the JLL presentation was superb because you said things with an awful lot more words than I'll ever be able to even pronounce. And in here, what we've got is a much, much simpler presentation with lots of pictures. This is where it all started for us 10 years ago. And this is where our relationship, funnily enough, with Crown started 10 years ago. Because we were trying to create some space, some extra space in our tower. We used to have the tower that's on the South Bank. It's a very tight tower. There were 1,250 people crammed into that very, very small space. But we wanted to create a new club space in the middle of the tower so that everybody could come, because nobody had anywhere to actually go to mix. We never had that space. So what we had to do is to try and work out how the hell we can get still the same number of people in. And in those days, everybody had a desk. If you remember those days, probably long gone now for a lot of people. We had to still get the same number of people in, but knowing that only 60% of them ever turned up at any one time anyway, and those numbers haven't changed, but 6%, we thought, what can we do? So what we ended up with was cutting down the existing desks that we had. So these were all 1600s, and they were all Bene, fantastic, beautiful desks. And we thought, what can we do with them? And Donna found a contact in Crown. Who was it, Phil? Or I'm not quite sure who it was here.
Neil Druitt.
Neil Druitt in those days. And we said, if we send you a load of desks, tell us what you can do with these. So anyway, they ended up coming back with 1600s converted into 1 metre and 1200 desks. And so the people who were there most of the time, only 60% of the people there, they took the bigger desks on the day they were there. And then everyone else who turned up occasionally took the smaller desks. So we thought, hang on, it can still work, this. What that did, though, on every tower floor, created us about 2,000 square feet on a floor. And with that, we were able to then put in nice environments for the staff, which they'd never had before. So it was all good to them. And even though they had smaller desks as a result of it, they felt quite good because we'd given them something in return. But it helped us. So that's kind of how we ended up with this journey. That opportunity then took us really forward to 2020. So the COVID crisis, it's three months old. And ITV decided already that working from home was a good thing for the staff because we could do an awful lot. So unless you're in front of the camera or just behind the camera, much of the back office stuff could all be done somewhere else. So we actually actively encourage people to work out how they can work from home, come into the office 1 or 2 days a week. Of course, that ended up then with a load of property that we didn't actually need. So the first way of being sustainable was reduce the property portfolio that we had, which is what we did. So we had some leases coming up in 2022 and 2023 on 2 big buildings, both 100,000 square feet. And we thought, let's see what we can do. So we were given an objective by the finance director actually to reduce the footprint by 40%, introduce a new way of working, because as I said, everybody all had a desk each still, to give staff a place they really wanted to work in, but to do this as sustainably as possible, because he, as a finance director, really was a greenie, right, better than I've seen many people, but he really wanted us to do that sustainably. Good thing about that, sponsorship, right? You get yourself a high-level sponsor in any company, you're going to be on the way. Careful how hard I press that. There we go. So we invented, the first thing we did is a whole new way of working. So we called it Manhattan. We called the Manhattan way of working. And if those of you have ever been to New York, you'll know Manhattan has got neighbourhoods, and we've talked about neighbourhoods for years in this country. Oh, we're going to set up neighbourhoods and so on. So that was all new for ITV because everyone had a desk. So it didn't really matter. So we talked about neighbourhoods, and we used Manhattan as our illustration. And of course, Manhattan is broken down into blocks. So we made furniture our blocks, okay? So this is basically a floor that we just dressed up, a drawing that we just dressed up to try and get across to people how neighbourhoods work together in the village, effectively. Neighbourhoods work together, and within each neighbourhood, you have a series of blocks, and these blocks are largely interchangeable. So you can change your things in there. So we then came back to Crown and said, right, we want a furniture system that will allow us to do that. So there's the brief to Crown, a flexible workstation system with a common footprint and design using the least number of different components. Now, if you're a facilities manager and you've done moves and changes, or a moves and changes person, and you've moved the people around, you will know the amount of bits and pieces that are left of furniture that's when it's put together. There's a leg over here and a top over there, and there's all these well-engineered bits and pieces left. There's always stuff left. So we said we don't want any of that. We'd like you to give us something that will give us a common footprint, but designed with the least number of components that you could put into a set of workstations. This is the photographs I took. Actually, we made several visits here, and we did many, many drawings, and we got the guy who was doing his nut in the end, but we had all sorts of different shapes and sizes to do something completely different than we'd done before. And this was the trials of the various things that we did. But anyhow, we ended up with this. So this is how most of our offices are fitted out. We've still got some desks as well. So we have kept desks for people who are in the office all the time. We still give them a desk, but most people aren't. So we've got the hex, the square, and the circle, and they all fit into a 2.4 metre footprint. And if you lay them out like Manhattan in blocks, you can interchange that for that, or that for two of those, or you can put a breakout space in the middle of everything just by literally taking one out and putting another one in. Whereas in the past we were forever having to move rows and rows of desks and loads of bits and pieces. All the infrastructure had to be moved. We don't need to do that anymore. So that's what we designed. We got Crown to build it. If you can see there, we've managed to get black legs there and black legs there, and those are completely interchangeable. So we can actually use one leg with another leg, so dead easy. There's no support network underneath that or that, but we had to have it with the square. We found the actual 2 metre square, when you have two people balancing on it, it's a little bit down, so we actually had a metal bar put in there. So that's the only extra component that's contained in there. And they each came with cable management, and they each came with a position to put a screen on if you wanted to. Hexes were done for people who were in the office 2 or 3 days, okay, and wanted to group it in clusters. 6 people around there. That's really, really good because you can talk to 5 people directly like that. Whereas if you're on a block of 6, you're shouting across everybody if you're talking to the person on the end. So they work really, really well. Circles, there's no screens on them. These are the people who are dropping in, doing their bits and pieces. They're there for half an hour and they bugger off. And then these are for people who, there's a lot of people in ITV working pairs because they're working on a program and what have you. They're watching edited video and they're doing, so they can swap, they can sit together working on 2 screens together. That's what we ended up doing. Oh, we had lots of these as well. So diners, everybody loves a diner. We had loads of them. Interestingly, I was in there earlier, having a cup of tea, and turned around and thought it was one of our diners.
Probably was.
Because it probably was one of our diners. Yeah,
Been
we had
recovered.
quite a few diners left over when we'd finally moved, and we brought them back. And I walked in there, and I'm sure that was one of ours. But we had them all recovered. So the stuff that we already had was quite tatty. It had the old colours in it, the old corporate colours and stuff. We just brought it here. We brought the whole lot. Bloody lorry loads, and got it all recovered, different colours and what have you, and sent it all back again. These things then all started to arrive for staff, so we started to test this out. Unfortunately, with COVID, it's difficult to test, but we started to test it out. But we were fairly sure of what we were going to be presenting when the time came to move people. So that's where we started with our sustainability thing. So reduce the office footprint, reuse whatever we can from our old buildings in our new building, and give away or sell what we can't reuse ourselves, and send nothing to landfill if possible. Anne is absolutely right about the landfill bit. Everyone says that you can do it, nothing goes to landfill. It's absolute rubbish. There's something between 0 and 10% of everything that we produce you can't realistically recycle it, so you can't go. What was interesting also, and Anne said this earlier, about recycling. Recycling used to be the starting point for everybody. Now, if we got to recycling, we were disappointed. We wanted to get beyond that, okay? And that's where we started from. So those were our objectives. And here are some of the things we did, very, very simply. This was the floor plan of the building that we took over. So the BBC building that is in White City, the BBC were moving out of, it's a broadcast building. We're a broadcaster. It was perfect. So we went in there, got a really good deal on the rent, bang, straight in. But it was laid out like this. It looked like an old chicken factory. The old unbelievable. It was just rows upon rows upon rows of benches as you walked around. It was just not inspiring at all. And we knew that Manhattan would fit into here perfectly, into these different zones, into these spaces. We could have lots of different neighbourhoods, different sizes. We knew this would work perfectly for us. But they also had, I'm just going to point these out, all these meeting rooms already built. So when we went to see the place, they said, oh, we'll clear the whole floor for you and you can start off. And we went, no, hang on, don't do that yet. So We ended up keeping these meeting rooms. We ended up keeping the T-points that they had both ends of the floor. We ended up keeping all their print hubs because there was nothing really wrong with them. So there's the print hubs that they had before. All we did was paint them a different colour. So there's nothing wrong with that. And it looks exactly like something we would have built ourselves. The meeting rooms they had were all these beige things in wood, and they had lots and lots of this stuff everywhere. We just painted it all out, and we added our own brand to it. So that became that very, very easily. The kitchens, this was the biggest surprise, and also I was a bit annoyed, but they weren't DDA compliant when we got them. We'd have thought the BBC, you're going to be DDA compliant. They weren't. We had to spend quite a bit of money just converting these, but it was better and easier and quicker for us to convert what they had than to demolish all of this and just rebuild it again, you know? So it seemed a bit nuts. So we added a few little bits and pieces to it. We put zip taps in and these new zip taps, which are a bit like Tai Chi. If you've ever tried them, they're really, really interesting. Instead of buttons anymore, you only put your hand near it. But because of COVID, we thought that was a good idea. But the number of people we get, staff going like this. But anyway, we reused all of that, again from the BBC, just put our own little marker on it. We took out most of the infrastructure from our old buildings. We had time to do it. It was mentioned earlier by JLL team about if you've got time, okay? We made time to do this because we had a staggered set of leases. We could take one of the floors later than the others. We were able to strip one building. We literally stripped that building. We took out all the on-the-floor infrastructure from it. These are all the cables and everything that we were parcelling up as we were removing them. And we took them all with us. That saved about £250,000, right? So it was worth doing, but it reused everything. We had it recertified, put it back under the floor, carried on. This is my favourite. We nicked the carpet, okay? That carpet had only been on the floor for 3 years. There was nothing wrong with it. It was perfect. And of course, we'd laid it about 2019, so COVID happened, so nobody had trod on the damn thing. So I saw the landlord, and when we were doing a dilapidations negotiation, I just said to him, what are you doing with all the stuff that we leave? He said, oh, we'll just rip it out because we're going to rip the floors out and we're going to do refurbish the whole thing because it were quite old floors. And I said, can I take stuff with me? And he went, you can have whatever you like. Happy days. So we took the carpet, and which was brilliant, and we relayed the whole of this carpet in the third floor of the building that we had now. Saved a fortune, but it's the best way of doing it. You can get recycled carpets and you can buy recycled carpets, but just take the bloody carpets that you've got with you. Dead easy. We took all the catering stuff as well. So we had one building which had a lovely catering kitchen, and we knew we were going to need a hospitality kitchen here. So we just unbolted it all, stuck it in storage until the time we needed it. We had a really good contractor, so we worked with Overbury. Anybody who's worked with Overbury, we had a really good contractor. And I've worked with the particular team in Overbury for 20 years off and on in many different jobs. And the guys know me, and they knew exactly what I wanted to do. They were in, stripping stuff out, and it was straight in storage, literally within a couple of weeks as I was saying we're going to be doing this. Because he knew that we would ask for it to come to here. So that's what we did. We stripped it out, and we put it back into our new space. All the kitchen, all of the furniture, as I've mentioned. We reused every single stick of furniture that we had. We refurbished the bits that we wanted to, because some of this was in quite bright old corporate colours, so we got rid of that, dumbed it down a little bit, brought it here, got it all recovered, and that's the carpet that we took up, which is now laid on the third floor in that building. Branding, right, so everybody loves a bit of branding, but by God, it not cost a lot, this stuff. These panels cost us about £2,500 a pop to put on the wall, but the actual screen that's on front of it is just silk printed screen, right? It costs you about £50 to actually get done again. So this, although it cost me a lot of money to put on the wall, it's cheap as chips to change, and we make a lot of programs, and we like to put the new programs up on what have you, so it's cheap as chips to change. But Donna said, well, why don't we take them with us? And I went, well, why not? So 30 of them he took off the wall and put 30 of them back on the walls in the other place. It's just a matter of identifying it and getting in there before everybody else to get what we needed out of there. And this stuff, right, so I don't know if any of the designers are in here, but if you've ever used key clamp, this is the stuff that you normally find on top of buildings as safety railings and things like that, okay? So we've always used this, we've used it for a long time now, but we actually construct our things for our big AV displays that we've got. And the beauty of all of that system that you see there, the only thing that I had to buy or change when we moved this was the two things that go into the ceiling to hold it up, because they just needed to be slightly longer because the floor to ceiling heights were different. That was it. They have to go onto the slab and onto the slab to hold everything down. But that's the only thing we had to change. This unbolts. So we had the whole lot unbolted, and I don't know how many of these we've actually got as a presentation space, but we used every single one of them again. And the beauty is you can mix and match. So we made bigger ones, 8 television walls, something like that.
Loads of television walls.
Loads and loads of television walls. And then we even took our reception desk. So we deliberately designed our reception desk so that we could move it. But we didn't realise we were going to be moving quite so far. But we still took it apart and took it with us and put it back together again. So we were able to do that. Again, saves a lot of money, saves a lot of time and effort. The amount of design work that went into the original one, I wouldn't like to have done it a second time. But anyway, we took that lot with us because we could. And that gives you an idea, roughly, on this particular project, what we saved. Because we didn't demolish all those rooms and we just refurbished those rooms, the T-points, the print hubs, the underfloor power, carpet, and all of those other things that you see there, it's about 2.3 million quid that we would have spent knocking everything down and rebuilding everything just like that, right, that we didn't need to spend. But what a story, what a story. The staff, when we explained to them what we were going to do, thought it was a brilliant idea. So that's exactly what we did. Now, total carbon saved, so many tonnes. Somebody told me this was about 180 tonnes of carbon that we saved. And whatever. I don't know whether that's true or not. The problem with talking about carbon, and that's the only time you'll see carbon mentioned on this presentation, is that people don't understand what carbon looks like. People in this room might, because you're all kind of people who might understand it. But if I said to somebody on the street, what does a tonne of carbon look like, they would have no idea. So you have to make carbon, you have to talk about things that they really understand. So we're not going to do a tonne of carbon, but we're actually going to replace all the carpets. And, that's a good idea, because it'll save a lot of the environment, you know? You have to put it into things that people actually understand. Now, we said try nothing to landfill. We got down to the last knockings, literally, of furniture that we couldn't send to another person, to another company to reuse. And a lot of it was because the furniture was quite old and it didn't have the tags still on, the fireproofing tags. You've got to have these things these days for a lot of companies before they'll take them because of the risk. Some companies will and some companies did, but most of them won't. So we ended up with a guy in our little, in one of our little storerooms and whatever, and he took apart literally all of the furniture we could, wooden components over here, material over here, and basically the foam rubber went into there. You found an outlet for foam rubber, didn't you?
Yeah, so we were working with that just when I left, and it was going to be sort of recycled into where they have children's playgrounds and things like that. So yeah, I mean, that Bywaters in the end did work with us to find it.
I mean, so that was the hardest thing. It was the foam rubber bit.
That was the hardest bit, wasn't it? Yeah, the
really
old stuff, the really old stuff.
Yeah, the really old stuff hadn't got those fire things, but we still managed to do it. Now people go, oh my God, that must have cost you a fortune. It actually didn't cost us any more to get a bloke to come in and do that than it would have done to dispose of that in a landfill or somewhere else. So it was worth doing. And again, the story, the photos we were able to take, and the story we were able to tell is good. We didn't stop even there, though. So that's on the project, right? What you do is load a project. You remove a load of group of people from A to B. They want to take a load of crap with them, right? We encouraged everybody because we wanted them to work differently, not to take all the crap with them. So this was a storeroom that we had. So what did we do? We closed the storage spaces, okay? So the areas that we had in different places in London, we said, right, we're going to close them as part of this, as an economy drive, we're going to close it. So you can only take not even 10% of what you had. But we managed to get everybody to go through every single cardboard box. And the stuff that we did want to keep, we put it into boxes like this and asset tag the whole lot. So that now people, if they need something, they can look on there first and say, oh, you've got that, can we borrow that? If you think about what we do in terms of production, we make lots and lots of different programs, but a lot of them have got some common things like, I don't know, every production's got tea urns and ironing boards and all that sort of stuff. We closed one building, we found 6 ironing boards in the store that people had just bought. No, we'll buy another one, buy another one, buy another one. Absolutely nuts. So we've now got everything in one store, all labelled like this, so that people will reuse it again and
they
again.
share it across production, so it's a bit like an eBay thing. So, you know, Saturday night takeaway.
And it's worked well, isn't it? They're all a bit doubtful at
in
first.
for a penny, borrow their ironing board. So it's much better. Otherwise, each production is buying.
But it was everywhere, wasn't it?
I know, we've never seen anything like it. It's incredible.
But again, so it taught them a thing, and we could do it. We then held staff sales. So a lot of this rubbish that we found everywhere, we got it all together like that and sold it back to the staff. Brilliant. I loved it. The guy from Love Island came round here and he went, oh, I've been looking for some of these, and he bought all these. But we didn't like to tell him it was Love Island from a series before that hadn't removed the stuff, and we'd got it and we'd given it back and he bought it back, which is great. Because we've now got a guide dog, you know. So we used our money. We set up a Just Giving page. We didn't charge anybody for anything. We just said it's just donation only. And staff donated money for it. And we've got one guide dog and we've got 3 legs of the other one already. So we just went to get
it's real good is staff engagement into the whole, you know, because they wanted to know where it was all going and said, well, will you come and be part of this, you know.
They absolutely loved it, and the fact that we do it. And now we get the guide dogs, they come every year to us now, so and they all walk around the thing and we do things for them. It's great. So, but that's a good thing that you can do from all the rubbish that people have got. Do you want to talk a little bit about this bit, Donna?
Yeah, so this was a really big piece, and I think what's key, and I think you alluded to it, it's really important to start planning around reuse as early on as possible. You know, don't wait till the project started, because it does take time, and there is the logistics, and where do we keep it all, and, you know, stuff like that. So we did that, and that was really important. So we worked with Office Resale and Crown, so a lot of furniture came here, it was recovered for us to come back, or other ITV sites, or resold on, or charities. We also did a bit of direct work with British Art Foundation, and particularly the Salvation Army. They've got a massive superstore in Northampton, and they were really keen. And they came to London. They had truck upon truck upon truck, never charged us for it, took it back there. We had a huge amount of kids' merchandise around Thunderbirds. I've never seen so much in all my life. It's all in the Northampton store. We also work with some schools and colleges, particularly this one, the Totteridge Academy. They had never had a decent place for the sixth form to go and study and collaborate and everything, and just by giving the furniture that we did, that was just amazing. So again, it was engaging with community projects. A project I'm working on now, we're getting the client to engage with community projects within their area, and you know, that's a really good sell factor. And also all of this we tracked, we kept the data, and lovely for your ESG reporting every year in your annual reports and stuff. So you know, that all ITV were extremely happy about that. So yeah, it was all very successful, wasn't it?
It was very good. Now, track record for ITV. So this, as I said, isn't new, and we started doing this way back when. Miss Kitchen, where are you? Where are you? Where are you?
Here.
There you are. Do you remember that? Do you remember that? So Julie was helping us in 2011. Yeah, we had a good time there, didn't we? 2011. So we started off, we moved everybody out of Key Street in the centre of Manchester. We were rebuilding Coronation Street, and we also took some office space next to the BBC in Media City. But we set a target for them. So again, when you're actually setting targets for these sort of projects, you can. I set a target and I said I would like as much of the things that we're going to use in that building in Manchester to be bought in the local area. So I set a radius of 30 miles. I'm from just outside Manchester, so I knew the area quite well. So this is what we're going to do. And we went out and we spent probably 2 or 3 weeks. We visited little factories, big factories, foundries, all sorts of places. So we bought, in the end, 60% of all of the items came from 30 miles, within 30 miles of Manchester. All the furniture came from Accrington. For those people who know Accrington, there's a big company there that make things, and they made all those for us, should I say. But 96% came from the UK. There was only 4% we couldn't. There were some of these, like orange box booths, but not quite booths. And the only place we could actually get them, we needed 4 of them, and the only place we could get them was Germany at the time. So we had to go to Germany and get those. It was a bit of a pain. But I nearly got 100% of everything procured in this country. And as I say, I'm really proud of the fact we got 60% procured within 30 miles of Manchester. We did subsequently a project in Leeds as well, and we did exactly the same things there. And I set Yorkshire as the boundary. So everything in Yorkshire for this state, if we can do it. And I think we did about 90%, but we didn't get to 100%. You can't, but we got 90%. So we've been doing this for a while. I built a Cochrane Visitor Centre not too long ago. The cobbles, for those people who remember Cochrane, if anybody watches it, were the original cobbles from the original set that was in Coronation Street in 1982. When we were coming out of that site, we were sort of walking around. There was all these cobbles. They're priceless. I mean, they are priceless. So I had the whole lot lifted and put into 4 containers. We then reused a load of them when we rebuilt Coronation Street itself. And then we came back afterwards and we built another street, Victoria Street, and we put more cobbles down there, but I still had some left. So when we built the visitor centre, all across the front of the visitor centre here, we put a load of cobbles. It's a nice story. And also the trees that were there were trees that were on common land before. We had to take these up because that's where our compounds were. So we took them all up, stuck them in skips, stuck them in our car park, left them there for the best part of 2 years, 2.5 years, and brought them back and then replanted them back where we were. So it can be done. One of my favourite stories, we found an old disused cinema, and there were the old chairs. We were building a cinema for there, so we were quoted 25 grand or whatever it was, 30 grand for the chairs that we wanted. And we went, we paid £300 off eBay for these, and then we had to go collect them. So we went to a little place in Salford, in Stretford, to an old disused furniture, and we took these out. And then one of my guys actually was an upholsterer, and he recovered them. So that was even cheaper for me to do. And he uphold them, and we put them in there. So again, it can all be done. They're all as good as new now. And then the last slide of this is Emmerdale. So anybody who watches Emmerdale again, you'll start to see these buildings come into new storylines starting in about 6 weeks' time. But we had a dilapidated farm that we had to rent because that was the track that took us down to the Emmerdale village. And we rented it, and the place was falling to pieces like this. And in the end, we ended up having to do something. The scaffolding there is actually holding the gable wall up, and the cars went underneath it. So in the end, we got rid of it. But we rebuilt the whole lot. It all came down. We reused the stone. We had to have a mixture of old and new slates on the roofs when we did it. And then we rebuilt the barn, and then we put soda on the top while we were doing it. It's a perfect place for it. We put soda on the top, but we reused, again, probably 80% of all the materials that we took down, we put up. So it can be done. And then final slide, what we learned. So very, very similar to the learnings that you had earlier. I thought, what a similar slide. Set the sustainability goals at the same time as the project goals. So when everyone's talking about the project and all the finance people are going, all right, make sure that you set the sustainability goals at that point, not a bit later. Get your contractors and your service providers on board early and get a realistic view about what can be done. So you said it early, it's a realistic view. I got over me and went, right, I want to do all of this. And they went, you're having a laugh. Because I wanted to do really ridiculous things. But we didn't have time to do it. So we did as much as we could have done in that time. Involving the FM teams and the IT teams from the beginning, because it takes a lot more planning to organise reusing stuff than it is to just go and buy it, ship it, and bring it to site when you need it. Okay, you've got to go and find it, identify it, somebody has to go in it, get it out, test it, bring it, blah, 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 blah. It takes a lot longer to do that, but you need the teams right at the beginning. We were very, very lucky. We had a really good IT team working on my project, so I was very, very happy with that. Research the charity. This is where Donna spent forever. Where have you gone? Have you been on holiday? No, she was researching the markets that you could actually use to actually get rid of our stuff so that we could do it directly with people. You can go to resellers and things like that, but we wanted to do it directly with the people, and we did. But don't leave that till the end of the project. Look, people get 3/4 of the way through and go, all right, what can we do with all this stuff? Too late at that point. You'll just need to get rid of it. But don't leave that till the end. Record your wins as you go along. We'd forgotten about half the things that we'd done. Over the years, we'd forgotten about half the things that we'd done. It's just that we'd recorded it all in photos, so that helped us. But record your wins as you go along, because the team, the staff that you've got in your companies are really interested in this stuff, really interested. And those little wins like that, they think, what a good company you work for. If you can stagger your leases and floor acquisitions, then more can be reused. We were very lucky because we had a staggered bit, so I could literally empty one building as we were refitting that building and just refit the building. If you can do that, and again, a little lesson we learned here, when you take a building, don't take the whole building, right? Take a lease every floor separately and take them all at slightly different times. The landlord can't stop you doing that. Right, but take them all slightly at different times, because you can do that. We had 7 or 8 leases at Grayson Road. We were able to release them literally one at a time, refit, move the stuff, move that to the new building. And then it costs less than you would pay for a new fit out, and it's quicker and great for the environment. So why would you do the sustainable things? The last 2 things though, and you've mentioned both of these, design things. I wish we'd have designed things in previous projects that you can easily take apart. We didn't use an interior designer for our move. Okay, I was confident enough that Overbury, who've worked with us many times, and they did our last refurbishment, could do it. we didn't use an interior designer. We brought them in just when we needed that particular piece, like a specialist bit like a kitchen or whatever like that. They came in and did it, but we didn't use an interior designer. We did it ourselves. But I could have done so much more. If only I could have taken... We left behind the nicest kitchens you've ever seen, right? And somebody's probably got them in their kitchen now because they'll have had time to take them apart. But we didn't have time to take them apart and bring them with us, and I wish we could. And the project programmes, time, it's all about time again. If we'd have had more time, we could have used far more. I'd like to have done all 3 floors with carpet. And as it was, I only had time to get 1 floor done. It was an acre, so it's still 44,000 square feet, you know, but it was a big floor, but I would like to have done all 3. And I couldn't do it because we didn't have the time. So if you can allow time, it will pay back and you will have a much more sustainable project. And I think that is it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Ian and Donna, thanks for that. It's brilliant. And actually, it's great to see your lessons learned and JLL's, and I think they're very similar to us. I mean, you know, I talked at the start about everything that we've learned in the last 10 years going into our thinking of making it easy and mapping. And I think building on all of those 3 lessons together will be something that'll be really useful to do. Going to get into urban mining a bit more because I think that's probably where we need to be. But the time and all those lessons learned were brilliant. I'm aware there's probably some questions for you, so I can see that hang
There we go.
Kudos, well done, just amazing. My question's really dull, but I've taken loads of lessons away, so thank you. The warranty, the risk around that, the dullest question you're ever going to get.
Mine's pretty dull.
Okay, maybe mine's less dull than Nikhil's. Did you manage to get Overbury and their subcontractors to accept all of that risk, or what did you have to take as risk yourself?
A bit of a mixture. So some of it we had to take as risk, but we were happy to because we procured the stuff in the first place and we knew what we were getting. But they took, so for the equipment, for instance, for the hospitality space and things like that, they were happy to take the risk on that because they were with us. We got them to go and take it out. So you take it out for us and put it in the new place for us, look after it in the meantime. So they'd stored it for us and brought it back. So had it been damaged or whatever like that, they would have told us at the beginning. But they'd actually installed that about 3 or 4 years earlier themselves as well. So you kind of come from that contractor, through that contractor and back in again. So yeah, it was a bit of a mixture, but that's how we did it.
And actually a cash flow question, because I guess part of one of the challenges on this is you have to front load the cost on that. And you mentioned that you had the finance director as essentially the sponsor for this project. Did that mean that you were able to, did you have to think about this up front, or did it become a challenge as part of the project?
No,
you know, delivering in terms of cash flow year 1 spend, year 2 spend, year 3 and so forth, and rejigging some of that. I
paint a lovely picture of our finance director. In actual fact, he'd taken £2 million off us at the beginning of the project and said you have to do it for less, and we went, oh okay, fine. So we did that, and he said, but I want you to do it as sustainably as possible. Okay, how does this work? And that's kind of how it started. But in terms of writing it off and capexing it and things like that, we basically split it into 3 pots. We OPEXed a lot. We OPEXed a lot of it, but the 2 pots we kept was furniture which we'd bought. So we had to buy all these bits of furniture and booths and things like that. And then just the direct. We didn't actually capex a lot of. We just capex. What did we do? We built an event space, kitchen, boardroom. And that was about it. We did in terms of construction. So there wasn't a lot of capex actually in there as well. And they write that off over where. My company does strange things with money. Okay, and although you very often many projects you do, they said no, just OPEX it, just get it done this year. Thank you. You know, and that's the way we do it. So when we've got a lot of cash, which we tend to be a cash-rich company, or we used to be a cash-rich company, just let's use the cash. Don't worry about the rest of it.
Hey, you know, we often hear the perception of, you know, well, it's a new project, an exciting building, shouldn't it all be new? So was there any?
You couldn't have told the difference.
No, but I know that, and you know that.
You couldn't have
You said some staff celebrated and thought it was brilliant, but did you have any sort of, anyone working against you, or there must be some barriers internally?
No, I think the biggest barrier to moving everywhere was the gender-neutral toilets. That was probably the biggest
obsessed
barrier.
by that. They forgot
right? Because we were moving from a building which had separate toilets for everything to gender-neutral toilets. That was our biggest barrier, believe it or not.
And the commute, because we were 13 stops on the Central Line to West London, so they were a bit too busy with that.
But genuinely, you walk in there. So I've done many tours of this building now with people, and they can't believe that most of this is second hand. That they're seeing, they think it's a brand new space, but
we brought all the brand and the look and feel, so they felt very at home. It wasn't a strange move, It was almost so didn't it? It was the comfort blanket was there almost for them.
Yeah, it's good.
I've been in the industry a long time, and I've been down many rodeo routes. But I was surprised yesterday. I went to a big campus in West Midlands, and they showed me around the building, and they had really cool graphics and tiny little business card sized notices on the corner of tables which said things like 60% of this furniture in this area came from our Birmingham office, or this table is made from plastic bottles. And I thought, why have I never thought about doing that?
Yeah, it's a good idea.
It's simple, isn't it? It's a good idea.
Things every day.
Yeah.
And it's all right telling people as part of the project as a one-off, but it keeps that messaging going, doesn't it? For new people joining the company, they hear the same message.
We're just building a new reception with the BBC, so we've got a joint. So we've got our reception, they've got a reception. We said, why don't we have one reception? So we're building one reception, but the reception desk is being made out of plastic, but made of melted down televisions. So all of this stuff, when it goes into landfill, this is just frames of plastic. And it's been melted down and repurposed, and that's going to be the actual.
And we were going to store all the televisions we didn't want in the end for that project, but it just took too long. It would have cost too much in storage, but that would have been a great story. Reuse all our redundant and in television we have a lot of redundant televisions.
People moving into this new space and having those gender neutral toilets.
Yep.
What was the reaction, and how did you deal with that?
We just said, get on with it. If you've got to go to the toilet,
After about a week, everyone got over it.
You know.
It was, as long as you have a very good cleaning regime, people just got over it. It was fine.
We've got a superb cleaning regime.
Yeah,
and they get cleaned 3-4 times.
And also, it was a lot about the journey as well. So I think the toilets was one they could easily moan about, but actually they didn't want to travel 13 stops on the Central Line. So some people moan about the things they're not really So the toilets got it, didn't it? Big
Very
time.
good as well. They were refurbished. All the toilets were refurbished. We didn't take on the existing toilets. We refurbished everything, so that was all new.
Well, when you go to a restaurant or lots of places, they're gender neutral, so it was fine. People got over it very quickly, which was good.
I'm doing the timekeeping thing, but listen, Donna, thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.